Well, I was talking to a close American friend of mine, and he was talking about how excited he was that his pastor was going away for a couple-week holiday. And I don't think I completely shared his excitement. And he was kind of puzzled when I told him, "You should tell your pastor that he's only half a pastor." So it's like, well, what do you mean by that? So before I explain my reasoning, let me just say that I love to connect with pastors. Having been and still a pastor for over 30 years, it's just something that I have a special heart for, especially pastors that are finding themselves in a bind, finding themselves in a struggle with porn, for example, and they're not sure who to turn to or what to do. Despite their role in terms of leading people spiritually, they find that they're having a hard time leading themselves spiritually. And so I, again, want to encourage you to connect with me. I've actually got about 3 pastors right now who are ready and willing to join a group. Right now, we are in the dog days of summer. It's kind of the end of July 2023. And so I've got about 3 guys that are waiting, and we'd like to put maybe 5, 6 guys together in a group, pastors, professionals. And so if you are a pastor, if you are somebody in a type of role that confidentiality is crucial, and I would love to hear from you, because we're, as we get into August, I'd love to start a pastors group. I just kind of call it pastors and professionals. One of my groups has got some pastors, it's got a principal, it's got a guy that works in a school board. Those kind of scenarios. These are mostly guys who are Christians in these groups. So if you're open or interested in hearing more about that, then I would encourage you to reach out to me at bandofbrothers.care at gmail.com. And we can talk a little bit. Sometimes I just this last couple days, I've met with 2 different pastors, and they've asked me about the groups. What does it look like? And so again, if that interests you, please get a hold of me. As we get into August of 2023, we'll be starting a new group. So I'd love to hear from you in that area. Okay, so why did I diss this pastor and call him only half a pastor? Okay, here's my rationale. First of all, I pastor the same church in a lead role for 25 years plus. So longevity was really important to me. I was one of those, real believers when I read Rick Warren in his book, Purpose Driven Church, and he talked about how important it was to have a long-term ministry in one community. And I was a believer in that, and due to God's grace, probably mostly to do with God's grace, I was an associate for 5 years, and I was leading in the lead role for 25 years. And now I'm kind of back in the supportive pastor's role in this next version of my life. So I know a little bit about all these different roles, but I'm speaking to you as somebody who has managed to stay in ministry for a long period of time in the same community and experienced the benefits of that. And so here's where I'm going with that. I think it's really difficult if you have been, let's say, in a lead pastor role, to explain to somebody who has not been in that role what it is like. The feeling of responsibility, the feeling of it's up to you. Of course, we all like to think it's up to God, but at the day, when we go to bed at night, our minds start racing with all the things that need to happen, or the challenges we're facing, or the questions or things we're trying to resolve. And I think the job of being a pastor has got even more complicated over the years. And let's be honest here. Stats around pastoral longevity and pastoral health, and how pastors are feeling about their role, are not in a good place. We're not doing well as a profession in terms of people who are doing well and fitting into their role well. And one of this idea of what it's like to be a lead guy, for example, I talked to a guy recently who's never been a lead pastor, never been a pastor, and he says, it's kind of like any job, right? And I'm going, dude, you have no idea what it's like to be out on a hike. Let's say you're out on a hike and somebody puts a backpack on you. Okay, and you're going, okay, I think I can walk a while with this. And as you're walking along, people are adding stones into your backpack, and the backpack's feeling heavier and heavier. I says that is an image of what it feels like in terms of, at times, the spiritual weight of what it's like to be leading a church. I says I can't explain it. I'm just telling you the way it is. And even when I was an associate for 5 years, I never felt it in the same way. Even now, when I, was able for this next season of my life to turn and hand that and give that backpack to somebody else, all of a sudden I felt this huge weight off my shoulders. I'm still there to support. I'm still there to encourage. I'm still there. I still speak on a rotation Sunday mornings, but it is not the same. So if there is this weight of ministry, then the question is, how do we possibly keep doing this for any period of time? Now, I have a little bit of a different perspective because I was a high school teacher as well. My training, I have a business degree, I have a high school education degree, I've got theological training, but one thing I've noticed about being a high school teacher or an elementary teacher is it's also a helping profession. It's a huge amount of challenges, in terms of being with those, kids, for 5 hours a day. Why is it that teachers, for example, have a pretty good track record around longevity? Right? Why is it? Well, the reality is that teachers get 2 months off every summer. Plus, up here we have 2 weeks spring break. We have, all of those different examples. There is a rhythm in being a teacher which is conducive to longevity. And I guess I learned that rhythm when I was a high school teacher. And so when I moved into being a lead pastor, we planted the church as a lead pastor, I had a bit of that rhythm already as part of my DNA. Now, I knew that 2 months wasn't realistic, but I at the same time instinctively knew, you know what? If I am going to survive this for any period of time, if I'm going to be able to do the Rick Warren version of pastoring in the same community for any period of time and experience the convergence of being in the same community and faithfully pastoring the same people, I'm going to need to create healthy rhythms of rest. And so I decided early on, I am going to take an entire month off, 4 weeks in a row, 4 weeks in a row off, and allow myself to experience some deeper refreshment and renewal. And you know what? I think that thing saved my bacon over and over and over again. I still went through difficult times. We call them the troubles in our church, like Northern Ireland. We had conflict. We had COVID. We had all sorts of things. The church grew. The church shrunk. Half the church left. Half the church came back. Different people came back. I went through a midlife crisis. All of those things. But throughout that whole period of time, the idea that I had 4 weeks off every summer made a massive difference in my rest rhythms. I mean, think about it. We all know a little bit about sleep, for example. Let's say, for example, that you tried to do your day by taking just half an hour cat naps throughout the day and throughout the night. You never were able to get to deeper sleep. Well, you would be going around like a zombie, because we all know in terms of, many people that I work with also struggle with sleep problems. You have those things on your wristwatch that tell you, what levels of sleep did I reach? Was it just surface, broken sleep, or did I at all reach that deeper level of sleep, which is so renewing and refreshing? And I would say in the same sense that rest is a little bit like that. When you just take 2 weeks, or you take, 4, I don't know, let's say you get 4 or 5 weeks, and you break it up and you take a week here and a week there and a week there, you never are able to reach that deeper place of rest. I mean, doggone it, for the first week, you're still trying to get church out of your mind. You're still trying to get your job out of your mind. Going into week 2, you're just starting to find that rhythm. And then you take 2 weeks off, you go back to work, you've never hardly hit deep rest. So my joke to my buddy was, you tell him he's half a pastor because he only got half of the rest he needed and never really experienced deep rest. I feel really strongly about this. You could tell. Now you might say, well, we're already in the middle of summer. It's a little too late. Okay, we're talking. I'm putting this into your thinking in terms of the future. Right? And so I'm convinced that we're not taking enough holiday time. You go, well, why the heck is that? Well, okay, first of all, one solution is everybody who's a pastor should marry a Catholic. So what do I mean by that? I married a Catholic girl. She was raised in the Catholic Church. Yeah, she became an evangelical, but for all intents and purposes, let's call her a Catholic. My wife grew up with really healthy rest rhythms. She gets it. She gets it because she's a teacher. She gets it because she just says, because I was raised Catholic. You Protties, your Protestant work ethic, she says, it's just, you guys are always pushing, never resting. And my wife has enabled me to rest. My wife's always pushing me to rest more. She says, why are you so driven? Right? She's always saying, you're like a beaver. You're always, and the old person, I am like a beaver. But she, so she's always been pushing me, to find the rhythms of rest. And so first of all, if you weren't blessed to marry a Catholic, there's other challenges we face. I'm convinced that many of the people that have found their way onto our boards are successful businessmen. I mean, they might be, godly men at some level, but I was always convinced that, when I talk to some of these successful businessmen, they're just hard chargers. They never take a break. First of all, they're not pastoring, but they think it's the same. And they're going to themselves or giving you sort of subtle messages. Well, I don't take 4 weeks off in a row. Well, why should you? Right? And we end up in our own insecurities going, well, I guess I can't do that. Right? And so sometimes we get these messages from people who don't understand our board members, right? And then, or we have, let's say, a driven lead pastor, and all of the people who are on staff in that church have to follow the same driven pattern that enabled that church to grow and be successful, in one sense, thinking that it was our drivenness which resulted in that. So, that's another thing that I think is there. And let me say, this was contested. I can't tell you how many people, when I took a month off, would tell me directly or subtly, Vern, we really are hurting when you're gone. We don't do very well when you're gone. We really love having you there to speak. It's not the same when you're not there. We really need you. The church really needs you. Well, at some level, that feels kind of good. God really needs me. Christendom really needs me. The church really needs me. I'm too self-important. I can't take a month off. Our church will suffer. God really, needs me in order for this church to go anywhere. So maybe it's our own self-importance or, whatever that is. But sometimes, and people would say that to me, and I'd say, I'm sorry. I'll do my best to find other speakers. and we tried all sorts of different things, some to greater success than others. But I said to them, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be here in 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now. Okay, some would buy it, some wouldn't. Some would basically say, well, it sounds, almost like it sounds to me like you're being lazy. All of those messages you get in church, you have to decide. Now, if it's your board members, they need to hear this. If they want you to be in your church for the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, they have got to push for and enable you to take this time off. Some people say, well, in the summertime, I had one church in Dallas. I was talking to a pastor. He says, July is like when we really hit it. I mean, July is one of our busiest months in the year. We got VBS going. We got this going. We're doing all this outreach stuff. Okay, well, then find a different month, June, or, where there's a will, there's a way. If you're taking 2 weeks off in a row, you're a half a pastor. So let me say that again. I know I'm annoying some of you, but hopefully I'm making a point here. This was so important to me when we had a young couple who was starting to we were talking about them beginning to step into the role of me and my wife and replace us in our role as lead pastors. There was some things that we did, and we said, okay, these things, we had a number of things we say, these are some non-negotiables that we have, right? These are some non-negotiables. We talked, and then we said, these are some negotiables. And I haven't gone back and looked at my list, but I know that one thing that was on that list that we really hammered out was to say, we insist that you guys, in taking over from us, you take an entire month off every summer in a row, because that's the only way that you're going to make it. And they said, okay. They were young and impressionable and teachable, and they hadn't, realized that they were that important yet, so they listened to us. But I also said, here's what I am promising. I didn't have this, but they do. I said to them, we will commit to work with you, and we will be there to cover Sunday morning when you're gone. So that was a commitment for me and my wife, to be there to enable them to do that. And so I am just, this week, I'm speaking my third sermon in a row. I only preach maybe once every 4 weeks or so. But for this month of the summertime, I'm essentially preaching for the better part of the month so that they can do that. Why? Because it's that important. So, do you want to be a half a pastor, or do you want to be a full pastor that survives and thrives in this role? Now, in the last couple of minutes I have here, one of the other things I will say to pastors is this. I'll ask guys that have been pastoring for a period of time, tell me how long you've been pastoring, and they'll give me, 2, 3, 10, 12 years, whatever it is. So inevitably, one of my questions is, so when is the last time you took a sabbatical? Now, I don't know if it's just coincidence, but most guys who are calling me for struggles in their sexual lives will be telling me, I've never taken a sabbatical. And their batteries get lower and lower year after year. Even taking 4 weeks off, over time, it does become a buildup. So my next part of this is to go, every pastor, I believe, for longevity, needs to be taking a sabbatical every 6, 7 years. At least 3 months off. Now, again, I've got these Protestant work ethic stories in my mind, and board members and work ethic Protestants going, okay, here's what we want you to do when you take your month off. We'd like you to go to a month of seminary or get some professional development, so that you can have this as part of a learning thing. And you go, BS. What are you talking about? Right? That's not a sabbatical. You're just wanting me to ramp up again my work, my focus. What is, my wife, I can hear her in my ears. What is wrong with you Protestants? Why is it that everything has to be about work and production? There's a funny, I don't know, it's a Michael Moore documentary does. I don't agree with all of his politics, but he's always good for getting you thinking. And he talks about the difference between the way that the Europeans understand rest and the way that Americans understand rest. And I forget which one it is, but he talks about going over to Europe, and he says, why is it that Europeans just seem like they're walking around like they've just had sex all the time? Right? Why is that? And he talks about the difference in workout, the difference in this approach, right? You're not that important. God can build the church, even if you take a month off, even if you take a sabbatical. I took 3 sabbaticals, had an amazing time. The first time I ended up doing a house exchange with a pastor in Los Angeles. And we switched homes. Our kids did all of the LA things, Disneyland, the beach, Legoland, you name it. That was my first sabbatical. My second sabbatical, I switched houses with a pastor who was looking for a sabbatical in southwest England. Wales, Wells, Wales, England. And I had an amazing time. And we hung out learned to drive on the wrong side of the road as sabbatical number 2. Sabbatical number 3. I don't know what I did in sabbatical 3. I can't remember now. But I did something. I know I did that. So all of that was part of self-care, was part of renewal and refreshing. Now you might be going, but Vern, we're already into August. I've already missed our chances. I want to just put this into your thinking. If longevity is important to you, if thriving is important to you, get off your self-important stool. Talk to your elders, or elders, if you're listening to this, talk to your pastors, and begin to put in place some long-term things that are going to enable your pastoral staff to not just survive, but to thrive. There you go. That's my soapbox for the day. I'd love to hear from you. And again, pastors, if you're looking for a good supportive group guys to come alongside in your struggles, email me at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next time.